We need it. Oxygen. It's why we breathe.
Hello, everyone. Back to Small Biz Stories. And we have got a wonderful guest, as we do every week. This is Nick Prefontaine. And what he specializes in with his business is motivational speaking. He had some trauma that he had to work through as a child and into his adulthood. And he's not only going to share some of this story, but he's going to tell us we can find motivation in this world that seems uncertain and chaotic. So, Nick, we are so happy. You are just going to shake things up for us. Welcome to the show.
Oh, Laura Lynn, I'm so excited for this. And actually, our chat briefly beforehand gets me even more excited because you gave me like certain things that your audience is used to. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Well, let's go back because people may not know who you are. And there was a very tragic event that happened to you at age 14, which has kind of set things into motion for you. So, would you mind just giving our audience a little background into that because it set the foundation for who you are today?
I couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely, it definitely set the foundation for who I've become and everything I do today. So it's a big part of it. It all goes back to that fateful day when I was at ski club with my friends in eighth grade, and we had all brought our snowboard gear onto the bus so we could get ready and not miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And we got to the mountain, and because we were ready to go, we had it right for the chairlift. And on the chairlift ride up, Laurel, and we noticed that it was very icy because it had been raining earlier in the day.
Mm.
And the chairlift actually went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. And I knew as soon as I saw it that I had to go off the biggest jump in the terrain park. So I got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. And going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard, and that's the last thing that I remember. So, due to the severity of my injuries, they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital. And they couldn't because it was too windy. So, they had to send in an ambulance. And out of the six paramedics who were on staff, there was only one of them who could intubate on the spot. And I needed that to be able to breathe. And lucky for me, he was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. So there are always, when I look back and I retell this story, there are always three things that I largely credit to being able to share this story with you and your listeners today. So that's the first one. The right paramedic showed up. Second thing was, although I wasn't wearing a helmet, the pair of goggles, like snowboard goggles that I had on, were very thick, with a lot of padding. So not only did they brace my initial impact, as I continued to roll down the mountain and continued to hit my head, they moved with each blow to cushion each blow between my head and the ice. And the third thing was, once I was at the hospital, I was out. I was out for the count, and the doctors came in to share the not so positive news, not so positive news, not so positive news, as I'm sure you and your listeners can imagine if you've ever been in any kind of accident or dealt with acute care with hospitals. They can't paint a rosy picture. So the doctors tried to do that in the intensive care unit in the room that I was in, right in front of me, even though I was in a coma. And my mom stopped them. And she said, no, not in front of him, because she understood that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. So she made the doctors step outside my room. And then once they were outside the room, that's when they shared with my parents that there was a good chance that they weren't even sure how long I was going to be in the coma. And there was a good chance that I probably wasn't going to be able to walk talk, or eat on my own ever again. So my parents, to their credit, thanked the doctors. They took the information, thanked the doctors, and then this allowed me to, Laurelyn, to treat it like any other situation. So none of this got through to my mind unconsciously or subconsciously. I still don't know the difference between those two things. I always confuse them. So it didn't get through to my mind. So I didn't know about it. So I just treated it like any other situation. And that was, as soon as I was able to, I got up literally and figuratively and just kept work every day, got up, kept taking my next step, and kept getting better every day. And it was along this point that I started to unknowingly use a system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. And that's what I teach to this day in my keynotes and my one-on-one work with clients. That's a step system. So
We'll get to that.
I'm just going to give a high level overview, and then we'll circle back to the end at the end, and I can give your listeners a way they can download it for free. So that stands for support. Support. Make sure you have the support of your family and friends right from the beginning. This is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. So trust that once you take your first step, your next step is always going to be available to you. This also starts with trusting that voice that you have inside of yourselves. We all have it inside of ourselves. So the way that I always like to illustrate this, Laurelyn, is when I was in a coma for 3 weeks. It was a partially induced coma. So I really don't remember a month. So a month after my accident, I was transported to a rehab hospital in Boston. And at the time, I was in a wheelchair. I still wasn't audible. I mean, at best, it was a whisper. And I can remember overhearing my parents talking with my team of therapists and doctors. And they were saying, okay, what do we need to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? I heard in the back of my head, you're going to run out. So run out of the hospital. So then running out of the hospital, I was able to communicate that through whatever, eye contact or writing it down, because I wasn't able to, it was a whisper at best. And that became our common goal. So that's T, trust. E is energy. Maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. And medication has the potential to get in the way of that. So obviously within reason here, that first night in the hospital cost $250,000. So if it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today. P is persistence. So persistence, once you've taken your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. And by continuing to do something every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. So if you fast forward less than 60 days later, I realized my goal of running out of the hospital. And it wasn't like my work was done, Laurelyn. I had to continue to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, along with being tutored all summer long, 5 days a week, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. And looking back on it, because I know specifically you said you're like the main people who listen to the show are like entrepreneurs or that like that realm of things. So it's crazy to me that only 18 months later, after finishing my rehab, I got my start in real estate, and that was door knocking distressed sellers or homeowners that have received the notice of default letter from the bank. So
let's just hold up on that. So
I'll
want to get
take a
into that and
breath.
kind of
Yeah.
right. Yes. No, it's all good. It's such a compelling story, right? And there's so many parallels to what entrepreneurship is all about. Right? You fall down, you've got to dig back up, even though it's hard. I can't even imagine what you experienced during those days in the hospital, and then through therapy. I've broken numerous bones too, and it's excruciating going through the therapy, let alone having been in a head injury, like traumatic brain injury, trying to catch up with classmates. So let's talk about how your experience there propelled you, like to self motivate and put you into a place where you can motivate others. Let's talk about that.
Sure. So I really I credit the that experience of my accident and going through that with like whenever I'm faced with any kind of challenge. So I think back to having overcome that. It certainly changes your perspective. Because if you when I was able to get through that, it leaves a lasting impression in your mind that okay, there's really nothing that I can't there's really nothing that I can't overcome. So whenever there's another voice from inside of me that comes in, and that's what really led me to doing the work with Common Goal and my speaking and everything to this day is that voice. And that didn't come up till later in my story, but hopefully we have enough time. I can get to that.
Oh, we're going to keep working through this because the whole thing that entrepreneurs who listen to my show and small business owners, they have dark days. We all have dark days, right? And you think, oh, why am I doing this? This was so hard. I lost a valued client, or I didn't win the one I thought I would, and things like that. What do you do on the days that you feel low, Nick, and you are having trouble motivating yourself? How does a motivational speaker motivate themselves on a day of low energy? What do you do?
So there's a few things I want to say about that because during the hospital, like during my recovery, it wasn't straight uphill climb the whole like uphill growth the whole way. There was a few dark days. There was dark days, and I can remember I would I'd start my day by having my occupational therapist teach me how to shower again. Then I would have breakfast and get dressed, and then it was on to my first therapy sessions of the day, and I had physical, occupational, and speech therapy. So after which we would break for lunch, and it was at one of these lunches when exactly what you're talking about, a moment of doubt crept in. And I was at the time in a wheelchair, and I had a moment of doubt. So I was looking over my situation and being in a wheelchair. And I can remember turning to my mom and asking, am I ever going to be able to walk again?
Mm.
And she didn't hesitate. She said, of course you are. That's what we're doing here. So you can get everything back and we can go home. So this allowed me to continue to keep going forward because I had that advocate there to advocate for me and be with me all the time. It allowed me to keep moving forward and to keep going. And there are, yeah, it's not all peaches and cream. 100%. You have to keep going though.
And that's just it. That's where I love that you have adopted and talk about the step system, right? Support, trust, energy, and persistence. Because you just talked about support. And this is a message for anyone who's out there listening. You may think you don't have much support. Maybe you don't, but there's more than you think. If you reach out through networks like this and the communities that myself and others are building, helping other small business owners, you will find people. They don't necessarily have to be family. There's a lot of other folks out there. And it'll take time, yes, to build that trust and all of that. And I really, I really applaud and hold to the last part of the step, the P, the persistence, because that's what it is. I I think about what you must have gone through when you said you had your goal. You were going to run out of the hospital, and how every day you had to do your therapy, right? The speech, the occupational, the physical therapy, like I am going to run out of this hospital. And you achieved it, Nick. It's incredible. Can you tell us how that felt?
Yeah, I think I touched on the it certainly wasn't an end. It wasn't an ending. If anything, it was a start. It was a beginning, running out of the hospital, because I mean then that's when the work started. I had a lot of work to go after that, and even it felt amazing. However, even after finishing rehab, I went on my own and sought out physical therapists because the shoulder that I landed on during my accident was weak. It was still a little weak. Because I was starting to get into lifting weights and everything, and I noticed it was a little weak. So what I did, I went to physical therapists on my own and got additional exercises
Mhm.
that I could do to strengthen my shoulder. So it's just about never, just because I never felt like it was enough. I wanted to, not that I wasn't, not that I wasn't satisfied. I don't know if satisfied is the right word, but I wanted to keep working, and I still to this day want to keep getting better in everything I'm doing.
I think that speaks to ambition, right? And like tenacity is what you're talking about, right? You just keep going, you keep trying. And again, that's where there are so many parallels with business ownership or entrepreneurship. You've got to keep going. You've got to try. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, let me try this. Maybe this will be more successful. Try this path. Because if you give up, right, it's over. You give
Yep.
up. And I think another key thing is that you set a goal. And that's really important to have that mindset. You also talked about how your mom had mother's intuition and she knew, don't say these things in front of my son. We're not going to talk negative thoughts in front of him. And that you didn't allow any of this negativity to cloud you.
Mm.
So, talk about what message you'd want to give business owners and entrepreneurs about the power of mindset and about tuning out the negativity and the toxic people.
Well, I think what's more important is the voice that you get that comes from inside of yourself. So we all have this, and especially I want to touch on this part of my story as well because it's I feel it's so important. So I shared when I was introducing trust how I heard when they were talking, my parents said, okay, what do we need to do to make sure Nick makes full recovery? I heard in the back of my head, you're going to run out. So that became our common goal. Then, if you fast forward later in my story, I was working as a realtor. After high school, graduated high school, I got my real estate license, and really all throughout my life. And then I transitioned in 2016 to working with my dad as an investor and let my real estate license go. Working with all of our rent to own buyers. So he was buying real estate creatively, non conventionally. Some of the ways you buy is like on a lease purchase, owner financing if they don't have any debt on the property, or actually close on the home if they have a loan subject to their existing mortgage. So that's just keeping a 10,000-foot view. And then, however, we're buying, we're always selling on a rent to own agreement. So there's only roughly 82% of the market out there who can get a loan today. So we're getting connected with them, getting them on the pathway to home ownership, and really setting them up to succeed and cross the finish line, whether it's 2 or 3 years later, go forward and get their own loan. So all throughout doing that, it's our own internal family business. And then in 2016, when I joined full time, we started holding yearly events once or twice a year. And I always was able to share, I always was afforded the opportunity to be able to share my story and do a little speaking. So I always thought I was scratching the itch, so to speak, because ever since I've got out of school, even though I was in different businesses, I always had this voice in the back of my head, back to that, saying, yeah, great, Nick, but what you really need to be doing is telling your story from stage and helping trauma survivors thrive with the rest of their lives. So I always thought I was doing that at our events. Maybe speaking, telling my story for 10 or 15 minutes. And I always thought that was a big deal. Um, then
It is.
after, well, yeah, that, well, thank you. I appreciate that. And then after hearing me tell my story at one of our events in September of 2019, someone approached me. And this circles, but like the end of the story circles back to your question. Someone approached me after hearing me speak and said, I'm not trying to steal you from your dad and your family real estate business. However, if you're ever looking to fine tune your message to bring it to another level so that you're able to have maximum impact and help the most amount of people, I can introduce you to a few coaches and mentors that have helped me along the way. Well, if you'll have me back at some point, I can talk about the voice challenge that I had and having the doubts within that. But I don't, for sake of time, I don't think we have enough time. I was still going through a voice challenge at that time, so I developed it in 2012. It was almost like I had tension like that. It was like hard to get the words out. However, I was still able to get up in 2019 and tell my story. And this woman approached me. I wasn't ready yet because I was still in the final throes of that voice issue. However, I always hung on to her card. And in May of 2021, I finally reached out to her because the voice in my head just kept getting louder and louder and it wouldn't go away. Talk about listening to yourself and not listening to outside influences. So I finally reached out to her. She introduced me to Trisha Brook, one of her coaches and mentors, and she became my coach. And I had an initial call with her. And since that initial call, there's been no voice in the back of my head. So what that's evidence to me, Laura Lynn, is that I'm doing exactly what I was put on this earth to do. So I had an initial call with her. I shared my goals and I said, "Do you think that's possible?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, what do you think I should do?" She recommended that I do the speaker salon. I said, "What's that?" So she said, "You commute to New York City for 6 weeks total, but for 5 weeks, you get to work with me and up to 10 or 15 other speakers to fine tune your message, and then break it down to a 10 or 15-minute talk. And then on the 6th week, you get to perform it on stage at the Triad Theater for influencers, TEDx organizers, other event organizers, people who book speakers to speak." So I said yes. She said, "Okay, that's 25,000." And I said yes, 100%. Well, during that, she also pitched the idea of what it would look like to work with her one-on-one. And she told me she specializes in helping speakers build out their speaker platform. I didn't even know what that was. Like I said, before Trisha, I maybe spoke 10 or 15 minutes and I thought that was a big deal. Well, she told me, she gave me that opportunity. She said, "That's 75,000. I said, "I don't have that amount of money hanging stuffed under my mattress." So I went and applied for financing. Yeah, right. So I applied for financing, and 6 days later, I sent her the money. I got approved, and January, I started working. January of 2022, I started working with her. She was the one that helped me launch Common Goal and build out my speaker platform. And now I deliver 50 and 60-minute keynote presentations to brain injury associations all across the country and also other organizations that support individuals going through trauma. So that's a long answer to your question, but that's tuning out the noise and listening in here, because everyone thought I was crazy for doing that at the time. But now it's 90% of what I do on a day-to-day basis.
But I think, again, it speaks to, like, bringing it back to our audience, it speaks to a couple of common themes, right? One, having a goal. So you set your goal. This is what you want to do, from running out of the hospital and getting better and overcoming your voice challenges to being comfortable in front of audiences and making this your life's work, where you can share your story of hope and inspiration and activation, right? That like, hey, you did it. Other people, other folks out there, you're going through tough things. You can do it too. And I think that that's so important how you've been on the circuit helping people by sharing your story. I think it's great. Nick, as we're heading into the last couple of minutes here for the show, so we will have to have you back because there's so much more to discuss. What would you like to share with our audience here in the last couple of minutes as we wrap up?
So there are a lot of elements that just for sake of time, there are a lot of elements of my story that I touched on. The real estate aspect of it. So we also now it's not just our business, but we also work with associates all over the country to help them buy and sell on creatively without using conventional financing or big investor payments or anything like that.
Wicked smart people. I saw that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's such an 80s term, wicked smart. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the company, Wicked Smart. So we now work with associates all over the country as well as do our own deals. And if any of the real estate resonated with any of your listeners, you can go to smartrealestatecoach.com. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can get registered for the free master's class. And then it's not a fit for everyone. However, if it's a good fit for you, you'll be able to determine what your next steps are at the end of that. And then more importantly, I mean, I'm biased, but more importantly, I only touched on today, we only touched on a 10,000 foot view of the step system. However, if you want to download the entire step system for free, go to nickprefontaine.com/step. And you can download that system for free and learn all about support, trust, energy, and persistence.
Excellent. Nick, that's a wrap. I will be sure to include those links in our write-up. And I do look forward to having you on another show since I think that there's so much more to share. But we'll have to wrap it up to keep it time for the syndication. So again, Nick Prefontaine, trauma survivor, traumatic brain injury survivor at age 14, and all that he's done building out a step coaching program, motivational speaking circuit that he's constantly on, motivating and inspiring folks all over the world. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Lauren. This has been fun.
And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?